KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning. Our great friend Heidi Harris joining us from Las Vegas. You can catch her. Well, we'll find out how you can catch her. By the way, you're listening to 107.5 FM and 580 AM. Heidi, how are you?
I am great. Always a privilege talking to you.
It's been a while to have you on. We hear the sirens going. You're always where the action is.
Wait, if you see me in handcuffs momentarily, no, just kidding. It wasn't me. It wasn't me, Your Honor. I promise. It wasn't me. It's an interesting town I live in. There's always somebody acting a fool. What can I tell you?
Well, I was going to say, let's talk a little bit about your projects. What are you up to lately? Have you written another book? What are you doing?
Well, I actually have mostly written another book, but I'm going to work on another one, I think, before I try to release this other one. I've got one I put out last year, as you know. It's called Don't Pat Me on the Head, and that's sold really well. I mean, for my listeners, and I had it at the NAB store, and when the NAB convention came to Vegas, and so it's done well, and I've been happy with it, and glad I did it. I'm probably going to re-release it and add a couple more chapters because since I wrote the book, I got reemployed. So now I'm working 3 hours mornings again, 6 to 9 a.m. on AM 670 KMZQ in Vegas.
You know, you are such a person of faith when we talk about whether things are meant to be. Let's talk a little bit about you and making a difference on the air each and every morning. Was it meant to be?
I think so. I think if anything, I'm now convinced because when I got bumped out last time for standing up for social values and socially conservative values and kids and things like that, and I got bounced out for that. I was okay with it. My identity doesn't come from my job. And even though I had just bought a house the week before, I knew that God was going to make sure that I ate. I mean, I didn't do anything legally or morally wrong. And I knew that God was going to protect me and provide, and my husband feels the same way. And I didn't know that I was ever going to do radio again. And I've moved around a little bit a couple of times, and each time I try to reevaluate my job skills, and I think, oh my gosh, I don't have any. So I just look at it and say, okay, what am I going to do, God? And then I got a call. The station in town flipped to talk radio that had been previously sports. And the last time the station flipped, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I mean, they just don't flip. And when the station first flipped, it was mostly syndication. And I sent the guy a note. I just said, hey, congrats on the flip, because I'd known this guy for 20 years, the GM. And I didn't ask for a job. I didn't think I'd get a job. I had friends saying, oh, you should go there. And I said, no, they're syndicated. It never crossed my mind. And then he called me. And I thought, okay, God is telling me he wants me to do this no matter what. Even though I might think about other things, he clearly wants me to do radio.
And indeed, you started with what, about an hour, and now you're doing 3 hours a day?
Yeah, I went in there and I started doing an hour a day, and I told the boss I have no interest in doing a 3-hour show again. And God laughed again. And so ultimately, they decided what they did is they moved Mike Gallagher. So I'm on 6 to 9. Mike Gallagher's on 9 to noon, so he's taped late a little bit. And then we've got Sebastian Gorka, and we've got Larry Elder. So it's a great lineup, and then Hugh Hewitt before me. And I know most of these guys. I know all of them except Sebastian. I've worked with all these guys in the past. And so it's fun. It's fun to be back in a great lineup of people.
Our great friend Heidi Harris joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning, the Heidi Harris Show. Now, how can people get a hold of you as far as online and on social media?
Well, HeidiHarris.com is the best way to follow me. Twitter blocked me out of my account. I have a Heidi Harris Show Twitter account. They blocked me out of it about a year ago. They won't let me on it, but they won't let me delete it. And so that's a whole ridiculous thing. So I use a backup one. But I got to tell you, Kevin, since I quit using my main Twitter account that had the followers on it, I use it far less, and I don't miss it. I just basically look at it to lurk and look at news. I don't even bother anymore.
You know, Heidi, let's talk a little bit about social media. We as followers, practitioners of talk radio, the original social media, but we have so many people addicted to it. You have the NBA commissioner saying because of social media, these young multimillionaires that have everything going for them are depressed because of social media. As a professional communicator, your thoughts on social media?
Well, I think if you put yourself out there, you're going to get smacked, even if you don't put yourself out there. Like I saw a story this week, Rob Gronkowski from the Patriots has this beautiful girlfriend, and she put a picture of herself in a bikini on social media, and people were picking on her and making rude comments and this and that. She's a beautiful girl. And you know how people pick, and I thought, I read the story and I thought, well, you put yourself out there in a bikini on social media. So that's what's going to happen. If you want to be a public person and do that, then you're going to risk the wrath and the jealousy and the whatever else of other people. So social media can be great. Like, I use Facebook a lot more than anything else these days. I post stories. I appreciate my listeners' input on the stories. I want their opinions and things like that. I put them up there really for them. I've already read them. So I put them up there, and I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy the interaction. But, Twitter, can be a complete sewer, and people are nasty, people who don't even know you, coming in and making rude comments. And I can take it. I'm a big girl. I don't care what they say about me, and I know you feel the same way. But it just can get very nasty, and there are people who are unhappy with themselves and their lives. And my thing is, if I don't like somebody who's on the radio or TV or whatever, if I don't like you, if I really think you're that terrible, I just don't listen to you. I don't watch you. I don't pay attention to you. And it's shocking to me how folks will spend time, like the way they're going after Tucker Carlson, for example, right? Or going after Jeanine Pirro. If you don't like them, just don't turn the show on. But why spend 1 second demanding their head on a stick, which is what's happened to me in the past? Why do that? Just turn them off. That's the best thing you can do.
Our great friend Heidi Harris joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. KIDO Talk Radio. Well, that's what I was going to ask you, your unique take on what Tucker Carlson's going through, and we'll talk about Representative Omar and the usual suspects, but the idea that, Tucker did something 10 years ago and all of a sudden Media Matters is out to get him. You have firsthand, real-life, legitimate experience with the folks that are trying to run people out of town.
Absolutely. And in Tucker Carlson's case, he was talking to a guy, I'm not even going to mention his name. You know his name, all right? A guy in the radio business who, as long as I've heard his name, has been involved in either some kind of litigation or something else, right? Guy made a lot more money than I'll ever make at one time, but he's been pretty much off radio for a long time, involved in court battles. And then this particular guy that Tucker was talking to basically encouraged Hulk Hogan to have relations with his own wife and then videotaped it against Hulk's knowledge, which led to the whole thing with Gawker and everything. So this host he was talking to, that Tucker was talking to 10 years ago, I don't have a lot of regard for. And it sounds to me like Tucker was kind of joking around more than anything else. Tucker's been married since dirt. He's got a great family. This is a guy who's clear as a whistle by all accounts. And he's just making some comments. I think when you talk to a person like that or you talk to Howard Stern, they're going to bring you into the trashy talk. That's going to happen. So, you know what? I like the fact that Tucker's not apologizing. But I do find it upsetting that the Fox News basically criticized Judge Jeanine for her comments about Ilhan Omar. I don't like the fact all she did is ask a rhetorical question. She asked if her wearing a hijab meant that she backed Sharia law. She asked if. Judge Jeanine's a lawyer, a judge. She knows how to ask a question and not get sued. And for Fox to say, well, yes, this has already been addressed with her. She asked a question. We can't ask questions in America anymore. And all Omar had to do, this congresswoman, is come on Jeanine Pirro's show, if she wanted to address him, say, I wear the hijab because I'm a Muslim, and this is what I believe. But yes, I'm an American, and no, I don't believe the Sharia law supersedes the Constitution. That's all she had to say. But instead, they're smacking her down, Judge Jeanine, for asking a question, which I thought was a legitimate question.
Exactly, and that's why she's our friend Heidi Harris. Back to Tucker, what's it like being in the spotlight when people go after you personally? We've talked about that before. We have so many new people moving in. I'm sure you in your state as well have so many people moving in from California, from some of these progressive states that don't understand what it's like when you are in the crosshairs of Media Matters.
Well, I've been trashed by Media Matters, obviously, which I consider a badge of honor. When I got dumped out of talk radio, almost a year and a half ago, I basically came out and I said something on social media about the fact that children do best with a mom and a dad situation. I never said that gay couples can't adopt children. I never said gay couples can't raise children. We all know they can. I said that kids just do best with moms and dads. And you can't believe the way I was trashed on social media. Every guy in a tank top was on my Facebook page trashing me. They all passed it around, right? People who didn't listen to my show, people who didn't know who I was, trying to destroy me. And then ultimately a big ad agency in Las Vegas, which is run by a gay guy who's got a partner and a couple of kids. Apparently he went to the station and threatened but they never advertised on my station, but they advertised on others in town, and they're pretty powerful. And so they threatened and huffed and puffed and this and that. And so corporate decided to fire me, which the interesting thing about that is I never whined about it. I never said, I'm entitled to free speech. You can't fire me. I never said that because a corporation is entitled to fire you if they don't like what you say. Because even though it doesn't represent them, they still have the right to do that. Like, say, for example, you and I, God forbid, we're at some white supremacist rally, right, with a torch on Friday night, and then we come into work, and I don't know about you, but half the people I work with, at least half in my building, are people of color, okay? So if I walked in the door and been at this white supremacist rally on Friday night, my picture was on Facebook with that, can you imagine how the guys who work the FM hip-hop stations would feel? Of course management should have the right to fire me in a situation like that. So I think it surprised my detractors that I didn't whine about free speech like Kathy Griffin did. Oh, I'm being censored. I never said that. I wasn't being censored. I just wasn't being paid by them to talk on their radio station. But it is a little, you have to have faith to be able to withstand something like this, because I think somebody who was maybe a little weaker, a little more timid, a little bit more concerned about what public perception was, I think they probably would lose their mind because of the poop storm. It was on every television station. I mean, for 5 minutes, and then they move on, right? But every TV station was talking about me. The newspaper was talking about me. The reporters were calling me. It was a big deal just because I'm a public figure and because I have my detractors in the media. As you can imagine, I have many good friends in the media, and there was only one reporter I talked to who happens to be, by the way, a liberal, but he was the only guy I talked to because I can trust him to represent what I said fairly. I didn't want somebody to try to take what I said out of context and editing and make it look like I was whining, because that's what they expected. So I knew who I could talk to and have it go well, and that's what I did. And then he went and, this reporter friend of mine is very good about what he does. He went and talked to the other people on the other side of the issue and this and that. That's how it should be presented. My side, their side, whatever. And so I thought it was handled well, but yeah, you could freak out if you got worried about that kind of thing, but I don't. I know God's got me. I know that what I said was true. But I will tell you one thing that really bummed me out was how many people said to me, you know, between you and me, I agree with you. But they would never take a public stance because they'd be afraid of offending somebody, right? So that was something that kind of concerned me, and I didn't need them to defend me, but it's kind of sad that people don't want to speak up for something that's so obviously true.
Right. It seems like we've been put in the closet.
Oh, absolutely. One of my friends who works in L.A. is a gay guy who's on a conservative talk station, and he texted me. He goes, "What's the controversy? Of course kids need a mom and a dad." I said, "I know." I mean, so it wasn't all gay people. It was just this particular group of people who got upset about it. But what I spoke was truth. Children do best with moms and dads. And my position had been very consistent. I have said the same thing about women who have children without fathers intentionally. You know, they just don't feel like waiting for the right guy or whatever else, and they're just going to have their kid, and they're going to rob their child of a father. I've said the same thing about that. My position's been consistent. It hasn't been anti-gay. I'm not anti-gay. And interestingly, after my book came out, I've given speeches at churches in various places based on my book. And I had one woman who said to a pastor in town, she said, "Well, I don't want to hear her speech because my son is gay." And interestingly, she did stick around for my speech, and she said to the pastor, "I misjudged her." Yeah, because I don't hate gay people. I don't give a speech that's anti-gay. It's not about that. It's about being hopeful and being able to hold yourself together when, you know, terrible things happen, because terrible things happen to everybody.
Right.
You get fired or things change or whatever. There's not a person alive who hasn't been through that.
Right.
Or mistreated or, you know, unjustly treated or whatever. I mean, my gosh, my case is not unique at all.
Heidi, hang on. More coming up with our great friend Heidi Harris with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you for waking up on the right side with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Our great friend, Las Vegas talk show host, best-selling author, former, I was going to say cocktail, which I almost said showgirl, but you can sing, you perform. Heidi Harris joining us once again. What can't you do?
I can't draw. I can't cook. I'm not a very good dancer.
Right.
And I can't do anything well that requires patience or precision.
I see. And yet you're a talk show host. That would require a lot of patience, I would think.
Well, a little bit of patience. It requires me to be thorough in what I'm talking about as far as getting the facts and that kind of stuff. But, somebody who can sit in a cubicle for hours and do payroll, for example, I could never do anything like that ever. God bless the people who get us paid. I could not do it. So there are things that I'm just not suited for. But I'm at the point in my life now where I know what I'm suited for, and I spent a lot of years, and I talk about this in my book, I spent a lot of years doing things that I really wasn't that good at, just because I felt like this was the way I should handle things. I should do this, and then I should do this, and then I should do this. And now I know, that you're better off doing what you're naturally suited for.
Okay, Heidi, let's get back to some of the political games, and one of them has to be this Representative Omar that gets not even a slap on the wrist from the Democratic majority, from the Democratic establishment. What do you make of Nancy Pelosi being afraid of Omar?
Well, you know what I think is so funny is that Nancy is used to being in complete control of the Democrats, right? This is what she's done. This is how she has stayed there. You talk about Game of Thrones. You talk about House of Cards. This woman, put the T in treachery. And now she has lost control of the House between Omar and what she said, and Nancy being afraid to criticize her and actually talk about anti-Semitism or talk about it in a broad sense and not actually slap her. And then you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez mouthing off every single day, cameras following her around instead of Nancy. It's hilarious. Nancy can't get everybody together, and that's why she's so afraid now to try to impeach Trump, plus probably Mueller's report, I'm sure has nothing in it about Trump. But Nancy, it's so interesting, isn't it, how she just has lost control?
It does. And speaking of control, let's get you to work safely and on time. KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Dave. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Heidi Harris joining us. So you go back to the young Turks of the Democratic Party. They're women. They're from all these states. They're very proud that they're diverse. And yet, what do they really stand for? The idea of socialism. We've been talking about this for quite some time, Heidi. I mean, you and I grew up in a similar time in America where socialism was evil, and yet now we have young kids today wanting to take us socialism.
Well, I would love to see anybody who's ever lived in a third world country say that. They wouldn't. Nobody in Venezuela would say that. And these kids are just young and dumb, and mommy and daddy provide them food, and they have no idea what it's like to have to live without Wi-Fi for one day. They really don't know. And I'm sure that's true in every generation, that kids they're idealistic. They don't really understand what it's like. I think what ought to happen, and I know this will never happen, but I would like to see schools invite people in for huge assemblies who've lived in third world countries, who've lived in Cuba, who've lived in Venezuela, who've lived in other countries where it's either socialist or verging on socialism, where everybody has either nothing or everything. There's no middle class at all. I'd love to see that happen because these kids just don't have an appreciation. They don't understand it.
What do you make of Ocasio-Cortez there?
Boy, she gets more attention than she deserves. She's really quite stupid, actually. She really doesn't know anything about the world. And just yesterday, she was talking about the whole idea of impeaching the president, and she was trying to compare what they did with Clinton. I thought, you have no idea what they did with Clinton in that impeachment. This girl has no history, no grasp of history, no grasp of anything, which I think is so hilarious that the cameras follow her around all the time. And this has got to drive Nancy crazy because she's now become the face of the Democratic Party. I don't know how long she'll last. My guess is maybe not more than one term, because I think that behind the scenes the Democrats are going crazy with her. And I think they're going to do all they can to stop her from getting the money. Because remember, she's very popular among some people, but not necessarily most of the people who can vote for her, right? So if they can just stop the people in her district from voting for her or try to get a better candidate against her or even primary her, then I think that would be a much different thing. But I think the Democrats will do this. They'll do it on the down low. They won't do it obviously. It's kind of like what they did to Bernie Sanders with Hillary. They didn't publicly try to hurt his chances, but we found out from the emails that they were doing this behind the scenes. I don't think Nancy would do this, obviously, but she would try to do whatever she could to get rid of this girl.
Well, you think about it, though, and Heidi, not talking about you, I'm talking about me, having miles on the odometer. I didn't know that a 29-year-old young lady that was bartending knew so much about, calling Ronald Reagan a racist and all these ridiculous things, commenting about things that she wasn't alive when it happened, Iran-Contra and everything. It's amazing, and it goes back to what we started our conversation with on KIDO Talk Radio. She has credibility because she's got so many Instagram people, or she's got so many Twitter people, or Facebook people, or Snapchat. And today, that is not only credible, but it's it's currency for analog folks. How do you make sense of that?
Well, that's true. That's absolutely true. There are a lot of younger people who follow her or think she's interesting, and then she has tapped into that group of people. I think no matter what you do for a living, I know a lot of people who will do a job they don't really like that much, and then they'll come home and they'll read all kinds of books. I think she's not bright just because it's her and things that she says illustrate that she's not very bright. When she came out with this Green Deal and then she cruises around in the black cars, everybody does this, right? All these people who push climate change, they fly around in jets, and they get in the SUVs and all this kind of stuff. And I have two words for them. Don't worry, not the words you think. I have two words for them. You first. And none of these people ever do what they want the rest of us to do about a Green Deal. So when she talks about things like this, like most people who are pushing Green Deals or whatever it might be, she never is able to explain herself. When you believe something, you should be able to explain why you believe it and make complete sense of what you're saying. And she can't do that. She can't come to a logical explanation of why she says things, which I think is hilarious, and the right's having a great time with her.
Indeed, our great friend Heidi Harris joining us, HeidiHarris.com, The Heidi Harris Show. You can catch her if and when you go to Vegas, of course, online on any social media outlet. We've got about 40 seconds left before the end of this segment, before we get to news. What do you make of just what's going on in the West with this Utah situation? We've got it on our website where the group of cousins, you're such a pop culture person, where cousins are petitioning the state of Utah to make marrying your first cousin legal.
Well, why not? If marriage doesn't mean one thing, it can mean anything. We had a situation here, as you may know, where the sister wives, quote unquote, lived here in Vegas for a couple of years. Now they've since moved, thank God. But I actually saw a thing in the newspaper where they said, oh, Cody, whatever his name is, and his wife. No. They're not his wives. One of them is his wife. And as I understand it, he had one wife, divorced her, and then married the fourth wife, but he's only legally married to one. Don't call them wives. Call them baby mamas, but don't call them wives. And that's the kind of stuff that you have to watch when the media tries to normalize something that's not normal. But as I have said all along, since before gay marriage became legal, why not? If it doesn't mean one thing, why can't first cousins get married? Why can't you marry somebody who, have two or three wives? Why can't you? There's no reason. No reason at all.
More coming up with Heidi Harris next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie. And thank you for waking up on the right side. Kevin Miller in the morning. Heidi Harris joining us from the Heidi Harris Show in Las Vegas. By the way, Heidi, how can people get a hold of you?
HeidiHarris.com, HeidiHarris, HeidiHarris.com.
All right, let's put you on the spot on something not political. What's the scariest interview you've ever done? Is it with one of these mobsters that you hang out with?
Oh, no, the mobsters are fun. Scariest interview? I interviewed somebody I'm not going to mention because he's a conservative guy that many people like. He was wasted, absolutely drunk off his butt when I called in, or he called us, or whatever it was. That was pretty funny. I've never been afraid of anyone that I've interviewed. I've had people I don't like particularly, and now I've gotten to the point in my life where if I don't like you, I don't bother with you. But I've interviewed people. I remember one time we had this guy come into our studio with an imam, and I'm telling you, the whole studio stunk when he left. I'm thinking, hey, we're not in Saudi Arabia, my friend.
That's good to know. So let's get back to some of the more colorful folks, because it's been a while since we've asked you about, the mobsters, the mob, those folks that hang out in Vegas. I can recall you in the past on KIDO Talk Radio. You've shared some of your more insightful interviews with these folks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's different today. I remember talking to, for example, Frank Collada, who was Tony Spilatro's hitman. If you've seen the movie Casino, he's in the movie actually as a hitman. He walks up behind somebody and shoots them in the back of the head, and that was some of the kind of stuff that he did back in the day. He mostly blew people up, but he did shoot a few people. He's repentant now. He's not proud of his past. He went into the witness protection program, and he's out now, and he's still around, and he hosts a mob tour in Las Vegas, and I didn't ask him a lot of really graphic details about it because I've known him long enough and know him well enough to know that he's not happy to talk about that kind of thing. And I've interviewed people like Henry Hill, remember from Goodfellas, he's now passed, but he was a hilarious guy. He was tough. I remember asking him questions about, was it really that way with you and your wife? And he said, oh, yeah. And so it's fun to talk to these guys about their actual stories. I know there are people who will say, oh, you're glorifying it. And I'm not glorifying it by having them on. I'm fascinated by what they've done, and so are a lot of people, and how many movies have been made about mobsters, which is evidence to me that people are fascinated. I've also had ladies of the evening on the show. I've had madams on. Most recent lady I had on was a woman who works at a legal brothel outside of Las Vegas. Contrary to popular belief, it is not legal in Vegas, but about 60 miles out of town it is. And I had this lady on because she had written an op-ed in the newspaper, and she said, I don't appreciate, I'm paraphrasing, I don't appreciate you do-gooders trying to make what I do illegal. And so I had her on, and she was talking about it. She didn't start doing that job till she was 51. Okay. Whatever. Interesting lady. But their attitude is, I know, right? Yeah. So good for her. So it was kind of fascinating. But my problem with it is, not that I'm trying to run everybody else's life, but there's a ton of trafficking here in Vegas. We are really the epicenter for a lot of trafficking.
More coming up with our great friend Heidi Harris, HeidiHarris.com, The Heidi Harris Show. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. That's 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDOTalkRadio.com. KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning, waking up on the right side. Our great friend Heidi Harris returns. All right, Heidi, let's talk a little bit about some of the more interesting folks that you've had a chance to interview. You've sat across from maybe not famous movie stars, but people that have been in movies or movies have been about them. What's it like to interview people that have actually been real-life hitmen?
Well, you know what? They're interesting characters because I don't think most of them have had any kind of, they don't take any pleasure from the fact that they've done this in the past. Like I've talked to Frank Collada and Henry Hill and some of these guys, and they're very interesting. And I'm sure if they could do it over again, they probably wouldn't do things the same way they did. But that was the life they lived at the time, and that was Vegas at the time, or that was Chicago, or depending on where they were at the time. It's just a different world in a lot of ways. I will tell you one thing that's stuck in my mind all the times I've interviewed Frank Collada, who was Tony Spilatro's hitman. You may remember him from the movie Casino, obviously. But Frank Collada told me that the interesting thing about today versus back then is if the kids had a beef, they went out and handled it with fists. They got out in the middle of the street, and that's what they did. Nowadays, they drive by and shoot at people, and it's a much more gutless way to handle things. And I thought that was kind of insightful.
Okay, I've been fascinated by Henry Hill, and I remember when he came out with his book and then the movie. Considering his life, why in the world did the guy resurface and go public?
Good question. I don't know. I've interviewed him, but it's been a while. He's now passed. I did post that interview on HeidiHarris.com. If anybody's interested, if you look up where it says interviews, I've done millions, but I put a few of the better ones up there. Henry Hill, fascinating guy. I don't know. I think that they get to a certain point in their life, they probably don't have a lot of money, and the mob turned on them and that kind of stuff. It's not like they're rich, so they got to try to figure out some way to make a living, and people are interested in their stories, and that's just the fact. And, there have been people who criticize, well, you're putting a mobster on, you're glorifying him and that kind of thing. And I remember at the time I was thinking, I'd give this guy, Frank Collada, my house key before I give it to Harry Reid. I just would. And I don't know. I think there's something about people who are real, who are flawed, and who admit it that I have a lot more respect for than the ones like Harry Reid who try to smile and fool you into thinking they're somebody they're not. I don't know. I just like people who are rough around the edges because I think they're a lot more honest.
Oh, they're rough around the edges. It's funny, though, you're saying that the gangsters are more honest than the politicians.
I would think they probably are in a lot of ways. And for the most part, not completely, but for the most part, gangsters go after each other. Not always. I know they got their business owners and that kind of stuff, but back in the day, they pretty much went after each other, whereas politicians are, mostly corrupt, and they're doing something different, but they're doing it in the three-piece suit, and they're smiling at you while they're stealing your money. We have a politician here in Vegas, for example, right now, a state senator, who just pled guilty to spending $250,000 people's campaign contributions, leasing a Jaguar, opening a nightclub, paying off his credit card bills. I'm sorry, who's more honest, a mobster or a politician? Let me get back to you on that.
Heidi Harris joining us, HeidiHarris.com, if you would like to check out her books or her social media or some of her newsmaker interviews. Speaking of newsmakers, we take a look at the president fighting for the border. What are your listeners talking about in Vegas concerning Donald Trump?
Well, it's interesting. They're not happy. Obviously, they would like to see a wall. I think a lot of people were wrong in envisioning some wall like the Great Wall of China. You can't do that on the border. And by the way, the Border Patrol people don't even want that. They know that that's not going to help everywhere. I think Donald Trump has the right instincts. He wants to make the wall tougher. There's a mess, and as long as we have better stuff over here, we're still going to have a mess. But I think there are other ways beyond the wall where we could make life more difficult for people who are immigrants and just keep them on the run and not give them things like driver authorization cards where they can drive a car legally and all these kinds of things. There are a lot of other things that aren't being done. A wall is not going to be the end of it, and a lot of people who come into the country illegally overstay visas. They come in on planes every day and overstay visas and things like that. So a wall is part of the whole package, but it's not everything. I am kind of fascinated by watching Ann Coulter and Donald Trump go at it. That's pretty funny to me because she was convinced he was going to build this wall, and he's not, and she's been after him ever since.
No, it's interesting. Our friend Lars Larson seems to have Ann on quite a bit, has a great relationship with her, and she doesn't hold anything back in going after the president.
No, she doesn't, and she just gave a speech this week where she was talking, I believe, in Florida. She was talking about how tough it is. She doesn't want to talk to the people who hate Donald Trump because you can't talk to them because they just flat out hate him. And then you've got the people who love him, and, you know, they put their hands over their ears, la, 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 nothing he does is wrong. For example, this is what I dealt with not too long ago. When he was in North Korea, and he stood up there and he said, well, I talked to him about, you know, Kim Jong-un, about Otto Warmbier, and he says he didn't know anything about it. There's no way, Kevin, anybody with half a brain cell believes that. There's no way that Kim Jong-un, nobody crosses the street that he doesn't know about, and especially not an American hostage. And by the way, think of it this way. Nobody ever gets cameras in there. I'm sure you've seen the documentaries. I have too, when somebody sneaks a camera in. Okay, that's one thing. But you don't have the 60 Minutes crew cruising up and down the roads in North Korea. All right, it's not allowed. But when Otto Warmbier was arrested, what did they do? They did a perp walk. We all saw this poor child crying in the courtroom, walking between these two tough-looking North Korean guys. It was heartbreaking. And they killed him for nothing other than taking a poster off the wall. Don't tell me Kim Jong-un didn't know everything they did to this kid from start to finish. So when I talked about that on the air and how mad I was at Donald Trump and what a slap in the face that was to the Warmbier family, remember in his first State of the Union address, he highlighted them. He had them in the gallery and made a big fuss over them. And then a year later, he's saying, well, you know, I don't think Kim Jong-un, he feels bad about it too. He didn't know. I couldn't believe that. And I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to come on the air and not say that if I think Donald Trump's done something egregious. And I consider that egregious. And then I have listeners who on my Facebook page and things like that would say, oh, well, you know, what's he supposed to do? He wants to let him save face. No. Donald Trump didn't have to point at the guy and call him a murderer. I mean, you've got to have some diplomacy, right? But he could have said, we've talked about it. I'm not happy about it. We're still investigating. Or anything other than Kim Jong-un feels bad or he didn't know about it. Come on. So I'm going to be intellectually honest, and I don't care if it makes people mad. That's all I can do.
Well, building on the president, what do you make of the idea that, you know, Heidi, last year he probably could have had $20 billion, $25 billion for the wall, and he played a game and we had the government shut down and he's struggling to get $8 billion.
Well, he shouldn't have opened the government up again. At the time, I was very vocal about that. Once you're going to close the government, you don't open it again temporarily. Come on, we all knew what was going to happen then. And I'll never forget looking at Nancy and Chuck standing behind the podium, smirking. And they said, and I remember Chuck saying, well, I think the president's learned his lesson. And I went, oh, did you blow this every which way from Sunday, Trump? Totally blew it. I don't think he understood the level of their treachery. There was no way they were going to do anything for him. And once he reopened the government, that was the only thing he had, that he could play, the only card in his deck, and he blew it. with no assurances from them about anything. And you had to know they weren't going to give him anything. I mean, come on. I couldn't believe he did that.
Well, going back to the point, in fairness to the president, I guess the $25 billion was attached to the Dreamers. Your thoughts on the Dreamers? See, to me, it's strange that even Obama, former President Obama, said it's unconstitutional, DACA, the Dreamers, everything else, but we're going to do it anyway. And they're still around. It's a tough situation. If you were the czar of immigration, what would you do?
I have a solution because I feel bad for these kids who were brought here as little children. If you can verify all the information that they're little kids, then you give them green cards. They can stay, but they will never be able to vote, and they will never be citizens. That's it. I think that's a great way to solve it because at this point they can't work legally. They can't do a lot of things, and I know they shouldn't be here to begin with. I understand that, but they are here, and this is what we're dealing with. We're talking real life here, right? So you give them green cards, you let them work, you let them drive, but you don't ever let them vote. They're never citizens, and if they spit on the sidewalk, they get deported. That's what I think would be a great solution.
Heidi Harris joining us. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So how does this play out for Trump's reelection chances?
I think his chances are good because the Democrats are so busy going after each other that they can't get it together. They're going to have a good candidate or they're not going to beat him. That's it. I mean, no matter what's happening. It's like when President Obama won re-election. I couldn't believe it, but come on, you had Romney. What are you going to do on the right? So if the Democrats continue to fight each other and the left-wing aspect of the Democratic Party continues to talk about, letting babies die after they're born and some of the more outrageous points that they have made, then they're going to have terrible trouble getting behind a candidate. And as you know, and I'm sure you've talked about, Howard Schultz, former CEO of Starbucks, is hanging around, and he's making great sense. I mean, this guy was an icon to the left until he talked about running as an independent. Now they hate his guts. And he was setting the agenda for the left when it came to Starbucks for many, many years. So when he talks about how socialism's not going to work and he talks about these other things, he's almost like the John Kasich of the Independent Party, right? Because a lot of people said, well, I could vote for John Kasich, and he's a Republican, but I could vote for him. I think a lot of people might vote for Howard Schultz. And if he's there, and you've got who? You've got Biden? And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has no respect for people like Bernie Sanders or Nancy Pelosi, and that's another faction. They have no respect for the old guard. And so with Nancy having this big mess on her side of the aisle, I think that's going to hurt them in 2020.
More coming up with our great friend Heidi Harris, HeidiHarris.com, The Heidi Harris Show. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. That's 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDOTalkRadio.com. One thing I always love about having Heidi Harris on is the fact that we seem to solve all the world's problems. Here we have, the usual suspects running in the Democratic primary, being 20, 30, 50. I mean, you're an early primary state. I'm jealous of you guys. Have the libs started coming in?
Yeah, we had Governor Inslee the other day from Washington State. He flew in to lecture us on global warming. And then we had, I think Bernie Sanders is coming to town this weekend, so that'll be interesting to see. They'll all come. Kamala Harris was here a week or so ago. So, and Elizabeth Warren was here. So, yeah, they're going to come in. They're going to come in and schmooze us because they want to schmooze the culinary union, where they put people in buses and run them down to the polls. And, of course, we've got a legislature in Nevada. They would like to increase the amount of time that you have to vote, the early voting, and they would like, people to be able to, of course, do the same-day registration. You know what I think we ought to do? Those ice cream trucks that drive around neighborhoods, with da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, I think it's how that drive around people's neighborhoods so they can walk out and vote. I mean, would that be easy enough for everybody? That's what the Democrats would like. Just go door to door with a little ice cream truck and everybody run out and vote. I mean, that's what they'd like.
The one, the only, Heidi Harris. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Heidi Harris joining us here on this beautiful day. So we go back to the Republican Party. And we've covered the president. We've covered the usual suspects that at this time are seeking to unseat him. But what about the Republican Party? Is it really a Trump party, or should we go back, as you mentioned earlier, the Mitt Romneys of the world?
Well, I think there are people who would like it to be the Mitt Romney party. And I've never understood these never-Trumpers. And I understand that some of these people are funded by some lefties and this and that. I'm not going to get into the conspiracy aspect of it. But I don't understand the never-Trumpers because Donald Trump is the head of the Republican Party. When your party is the president, that's who's the head of the party. And if you don't like him, then that's okay. You still get in the vote and row. I don't care who you are. You might have a boss you don't like or a co-worker you don't like or somebody. You have to try to achieve an objective so you get in the vote and row. And these people who spend all their time throwing rocks at Trump, I'm talking about people on the so-called right, they're not helping anybody. And that's not what we need. Donald Trump has tried to do, listen, I think the guy's surprised he won the presidency. All right, let's be honest. But I think he's tried to do the best he can. They just never, ever let him get one bit of air. But he's done good things with the Supreme Court. He's done good things with Israel. He's done good things with some of the other judges. He's protected religious rights, even though this is a guy who probably, I don't even know if he's ever cracked the Bible, other than sign in front of him. But you know what? It doesn't matter if he's a religious person from that perspective, because at least he's defending my religious freedom. Would it be better I'd love to have someone like Mike Pence as president, okay? That's not going to happen. You and I both know that's not going to happen, which is one reason they're not going to try to impeach Donald Trump. They're terrified of Mike Pence.
Why do you think they're terrified of Pence?
Because Pence is a conservative. They got nothing on him, and he's a decent person, and they don't like it. And the only thing they can say about Mike Pence that points to his being an indecent person, and you may have seen this exchange, is the fact that he had a record they say was anti-LGBT rights, which is not true at all. He used to want to give people special rights. But they've got nothing on Mike Pence. He's a very decent person, and he doesn't mouth off, and he's very presidential in a lot of ways, and so they don't want Mike Pence because he can be very effective, I think.
Well, what do you think is going to happen to Boehner and Ryan, all these establishment folks that during the Romney run pretty much had everything, and now they're outside looking in, and all those folks that resigned, and now we've got libs in the House because so many Republicans decided to skate?
Well, that's true, and then you've got people like Steve Bannon and other folks who are on the outside looking in, and then you've got Roger Stone and all these other folks, Paul and so forth. It's changed. The landscape has changed, hasn't it? And I think that we'll not really know the true wreckage of Donald Trump. When I say wreckage, I mean I know people who've left talk radio because they were never Trumpers, and when Trump got elected, they just had nowhere to go. They were in a corner and they didn't know what to do. There are people who've given up the Republican Party because they don't like Trump, or the conservatives who are evangelicals, as you know, are fighting with each other about Trump. You know, some people say, oh, he's this, he's that. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. As long as human beings have existed, look at the book of Kings, for example. This king was worse than that king, was worse than that king, was worse than that king. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, this and that. Well, even if Donald Trump was an evil king, you're obligated to live your life as unto the Lord. Live your life according to what you believe God wants you to do, and stop focusing on the politicians. We're not going to have a perfect person. Everybody's going to have their issues. And yeah, Donald Trump with a couple ex-wives and kids and this and that and the other, I know people aren't thrilled about it. But Jesus wasn't running. I like Ted Cruz. He was my first choice. But, they're not running. So you've got to go with the guy who's there now. Doesn't mean you have to love everything about him or embrace everything about him or, back up every tweet. No. But you have to at least say, okay, this is the guy. I'm going to try to make him, put him on the right track, mitigate the damage as much as I possibly can, or whatever. You don't give up the fight because you don't like the person at the helm of the ship.
I still can't believe there are people in talk radio that survived Obama, but have nowhere to go because they were never Trumpers. It just seems odd. For me, Obama was such a huge challenge in talk radio because they, as you've experienced and others have, they've sought to silence people.
Yeah, they did seek to silence people. That's absolutely true. Well, once again, I didn't understand the Never-Trumpers. I was a Ted Cruz person, and once Donald Trump became the nominee, I was on board because he was the guy. There's no choice. Hillary? I wasn't going to give Hillary a free vote. That's the thing that people keep screwing up on, and they want to give Hillary a free vote. No, that's not the way it works. I wasn't going to let that happen. So at least I went out and voted for Trump because he's better than her on a lot of other issues. And I don't really care whether Vladimir Putin thinks that, prefers Trump to Hillary. And I got to tell you, I don't know if Vladimir has something on Trump. I've had guests on my show who believe he absolutely does. I don't know that that's true, but still, I would rather have Trump in the White House than Hillary Clinton, certainly on a domestic level. And I think that Trump's got some people in the White House, Mike Pompeo and other people like that, who really pay attention to what's going on in the world, who have a firmer grasp on world politics than Trump does, because, Trump hasn't been president that long. And I think they're keeping a close eye on it. And anybody who's panicked about it just needs to remember that our founders set in place an amazing system where you don't get too much of what you want, I don't get too much of what I want. There are checks and balances. It's not like Trump's going to be able to go off the rails and push a button and hit somebody with a nuclear weapon. It's not going to happen.
And then it comes back to socialism. We talk about the beauty of America, and yet we have Americans, a new poll out, we've been talking about this for a couple days now, that young Americans love the socialism even though they don't know what the heck it means.
Well, yeah, because they've never lived outside of mommy and daddy's house. I mean, look how many people, I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people still have kids in their 20s living at home. Are you kidding me? I couldn't wait to get out of the house, and I had a good home situation, but I just wanted to live in my own place. I mean, these people have never even bought their own scrubber for their, sink. And they're going to talk about socialism? They have no idea that all we can hope for is that most of these people won't vote. Unfortunately, a lot of them will, but most of them probably won't bother to vote. They're idealistic at that age, and look at the colleges. Look at the garbage they're teaching in colleges. No wonder these kids are like this. And it's very sad because they just really don't understand that they would have nothing under socialism and somebody else would have everything. That's what they don't get.
Heidi Harris, we always appreciate you, and keep up the conservatism, and more particularly the social conservative. It's so important. Sometimes I believe we're endangered species, those of us that espouse social conservatism.
I think that's true, and the Republican Party really doesn't as much as it should anymore, certainly not in Nevada and a lot of, for heaven's sake, we pushed a guy who was a pimp.
Yeah.
to be in the legislature. So we're doing the best we can, Kevin. You and I are doing the best we can. That's all we're called to do, is to be faithful and do our best.
Our great friend Heidi Harris, you're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.